Hello, figments of my imagination. Stelle has been out for 2 months now, and I've played her essentially non-stop since release, so I think it's time to do a guide. Much like my Dooley guide, I want to focus on play patterns and specific strategies, but the reality of Stelle is that her card pool and available decks greatly impact how you go about your days. So that being said, I'm going to start this one off with the different builds and suggestions around each of them. Then I'll cover how I think different days should be played, along with a more general approach to Stelle. Let's start it off with the early game. For the first few days, there are three main decks to pursue: Tools, Aerial Turret, and Start-Stop. Tools is a pretty straightforward deck that revolves around Molten Ball Blaster and has as many low cooldown tools as you can find. The strategy can even have some legs in the late game thanks to Stell's Workshop, especially if you can snag Dinosaur. PvE combats offer a lot of good perks and non-Stell tools, such as Pyro Day 1 for Lighter and Ventriloquist for the free ride skill Day 2. Always check Bazaar DB if you're unsure of what an encounter has. One of the big flaws of Tools is pivoting. Your cards don't really overlap with many other decks. However, like I said earlier, Tools itself can easily go the distance, which also means you'll have plenty of time to build a pivot deck inside your bag. Of note, Molten Ball Blaster is on the short list for upcoming nerfs in the October 8th patch. Depending on what they do, Tools could just die as a deck, considering the vast majority of its strength is tied up on that card. But we will see. The next early game deck is Aerial Turret. The entire deck revolves around pumping Aerial Turret and giving it flying. The only really required pieces are Aerial Turret and a Flying Enabler, but there's a long list of support cards that can be used. One of the strongest is Shadowed Cloak, as it provides both important damage scaling along with infinite haste. PvE combats also have some great options early. Kyber Drone for the skill Day 1 can help stay relevant for a while longer. Both of the Silver Fights Day 2 have good support, and the same with Product Demonstrator and Frost Street Day 3. But the most important is probably Day 4. Getting Crow's Nest from Blood Reef Raider could actually allow you to take Aerial Turret all the way to 10 wins. That being said, barring a great high roll, you're basically required to pivot. Luckily, pivoting is very easy with so few required cards. You can even create a type of hybrid deck by including part of the Start-Stop deck to add survivability. Either way, be prepared to abandon ship when something even remotely powerful shows up. The final, and in my opinion strongest, early game deck is Start-Stop. This deck revolves around the various cards that trigger on items starting or stopping flight. For the first few days, you don't even really need a win condition. The survival items are typically strong enough. Freefall Simulator is by far the best card for the deck. Kite and Tethers complete the near unbeatable Day 1 trifecta, offering enough shield and regen to beat almost anything a Day 1 opponent could have. If you want a win condition, or when you're moving on to Day 2, Balloon Engine is a common one. Clockwork Disc and Gyroscope can work in a pinch, and Disc is an item you want anyways. When silver items start showing up, Parachute is incredibly strong, and Birdcage is basically a strict upgrade to Tethers. With a good survival core, you can take on basically every PvE encounter easily. With that in mind, I normally like to fish for strong skills to build around, or unique items, rather than on improving the Start-Stop deck itself. And since we're already on the topic, transitioning into late game is pretty easy. Daggerwing and Hang Glider are powerful win conditions that slot easily enough. Wrecking Ball can also work pretty well, but it's a bit less consistent. You are also normally strong enough to just build a second deck in your bags, similar to Tools, or depending on matchups, you could just go all the way with Balloon Engine. Speaking of matchups, Start-Stop does have a little bit of play to it in terms of matchups. For example, mid-game Mac is a bit of a menace for Balloon Engine builds. Regen builds completely blank your win condition, and burst builds can kill you before your engine matters. But knowing that, you can keep additional survival options in your bag to basically guarantee the win in Sandstorm. Personally, I like to keep the Tethers around for the mid-game and sub out Balloon Engine against Mac. Tethers plus Birdcage is normally enough to survive Burst, and Parachute, Kite, or Oxygen Mask should give enough regen to counter poison. And just like Tools, Start-Stop has a pair of cards on the to be nerfed list, Parachute and Tethers specifically. And honestly, Parachute deserves it. Maybe Tethers is too good early too. Either way, I'm confident the deck will stick around no matter how much they're nerfed. The other pieces are just that strong. With early game locked up, it's important to be prepared for the late game, and the best way to do that is to know the late game decks and the key pieces to pick up when trying to transition. To that end, let's talk about the late game. Private Runabout is an incredibly strong large card that starts at silver. It also is one of the easiest ways to push an early lead into a 10 win before day 12. At the most basic level, deck is Runabout plus things that give flying, and possibly things that pump the Runabout. That blueprint makes Aerial Turret a pretty good starting point. The combo of choice is typically Launch Tower plus vehicles. Vortex Cannon, Hang Glider, and even Weather Machine are all good options to turn on the Runabout quickly as well. With the recent rebalancing, getting Runabout to 1 second is harder, but the base damage at 100 means pumping is less required, at least for the first few days. Runabout also has an easy transition to one of the strongest, most consistent one-shot combos Stelle has. If you can get a Thrusters, typically through Infernal Frigate on day 8, or Pearl, then you can use it to turn Space Laser into a vehicle, which lets Launch Tower activated at 8 seconds as long as you have no other vehicles. No matter what Stelle build you go with, keep this combo in the back of your mind and always pick up Thrusters if you can. Speaking of Space Laser, let's move on to my favorite, though definitely not most successful deck, Space Laser Combo. The ideal build is Radar Dome, Ornithopter, Observatory, and Space Laser. And yes, that is 3 large items, making laser a very expensive transition. It's also a pretty rough one, considering none of the large parts are typically used in other decks. As for playing the deck, positioning is pretty important. If Observatory is Diamond, then you want Radar Dome to the left of Ornithopter. Otherwise, Observatory should get the cooldown reduction. Either way, Space Lasers never touch Ornithopter. It's way more important to give the other 2 items flying as soon as possible. Upgrades are very important for this deck. In order, if possible, upgrade Observatory, Laser, Ornithopter, and then Dome. Enchantments are probably the most important, honestly. Obsidian, Fiery, or Shielded for Observatory is basically mandatory, since it will loop itself with Radar Dome. The same enchantments on Radar Dome or Ornithopter will also help speed up the combo. In addition to the massive cost of getting the deck online, you also have to worry about getting Radar Dome stacked. That makes Start Stop a good jumping off point. All that being said, despite how much I personally like the deck, I don't really recommend it unless you're looking at going past day 14, and even then, there are probably better options, but none of them are as satisfying, that's for sure. Sticking with the theme of one-shot decks, we have the Destroy deck. Personally, I've only played it a few times, but it's definitely very strong with the right setup. That setup basically involves Lava Roller and the big one. Launch Tower is also pretty helpful in both speeding up the combo and doubling Lava Roller's damage and destroyability. And if you're lucky, Keychain from Property Baron can speed up the combo even more. The biggest drawback of the deck is the reliance on enchanting the big one with Obsidian, which was recently made a rare enchantment. That being said, if you can swing it, you almost always one-shot. With that in mind, I've made a habit of picking up the big one anytime I see it before level 10, just in case. Without Obsidian or Shiny, you could try to go off with Poison, or just rely on Fiery on Lava Roller. A second copy of the big one is also possible with Mandala, just remember that it starts at gold. And if all else fails, Diamond Hydrogen Tank might be enough to seal the deal. Also of note is that the next patch is going to finally enable Bomb Voyage, another part of the Destroy package that's been disabled all this time. It might help push the deck a little further. Slow Matters has quickly become one of Stell's signature decks, mainly thanks to Lightning Rod. Turns out that Proboscis is still good, even if it's a large item. Jokes aside, Stelle does have the strongest mass slows in the game, and the best ways to convert them to damage. Lightning Rod, Steam Hose, and Sky Anchor are the typical win conditions, but lucking into Proboscis or Femur instead is incredibly strong. No matter what win condition you choose, you should always hold a Lightning Rod for the mirror. For actually slowing, Weather Machine, Flashbang, and Fire Hose are the main enablers. Of note, since Weather Machine and Fire Hose both slow your own things as well, they give more triggers than Flashbang. Pump effects on Lightning Rod or Proboscis are incredibly strong. In fact, you can dedicate almost your entire deck to pumping those cards and win with a single Fire Hose or Weather Machine if you want. Keep an eye out for skills that benefit from slow, like Thick Hide Trained and Slow and Steady. Check Bazaar DB for PvE encounters with them. Speaking of PvE, there are a few less obvious ones to keep in mind. Of course, you want Kyber Drone Day 1 and Mosquito Day 3 and 6 if you can beat it, but Frost Street Challenger's skill Day 3 is also incredibly strong with Weather Machine. In fact, pumping is so important, even getting Weak Point Detector from Hoverbike Hooligan can be good enough. But by far the most important encounters to try for are Oasis Garden and Wandering Shoal. Oasis has a shot at Femur, and Shoal's perk basically guarantees the win. The biggest downside of the slow deck by far is the swinging nature of matchups. There are plenty of matchups where you're just dead, but that's an acceptable risk for the strength of the deck, in my opinion. The final late game deck I want to mention is Steam Balloon. This deck abuses Battle Balloon and Steam Washer, typically with Pressure Heater to pump, and it really took off with the addition of the Bombs Away skill last patch, allowing Battle Balloon to loop itself pretty easily, especially with a Fire Enchantment or Radar Dome, or both. Overall, the deck is pretty versatile and can go infinite with a bunch of skills or items. You also don't really need upgrades on anything but Pressure Heater. Getting a defensive enchant on Steam Washer is pretty strong, just like a fiery enchant on the Balloon. Beyond that, just look for anything that goes well with Battle Balloon and Steam Washer. Flare Gun is obviously great, and picking up a silver toolbox to go for multiples gets out of hand pretty quickly. Personally, I haven't played it nearly enough since it's effectively a new deck with this patch, but I think it might be one of the most well-rounded options for Stelle, capable of coming online early and winning even past day 14. Now that we've covered the decks, it's time to dive into the details, starting with day 1. Looking at the list of early game decks, the most obvious takeaway is that medium items are extremely important. With that in mind, medium shop is the best choice always and is worth re-rolling on. In general, bronze small items for Stelle are pretty mediocre. Disc and gyroscope are good, and a bunch of tools are fine once you have Molten Ball Blaster, but other than that, it's not worth wasting money re-rolling on small vendor. Midsworth and Quixel should probably be avoided, and if chosen, should definitely not be re-rolled on. Conversely, Flying Shop is great and can even be worth the steep re-roll price. Curio is still good for an early knee brace and egg, but it is a gamble. Day 1 should be spent hunting for any and all of the medium pieces. Freefall, Molten Ball, Balloon, Kite, Tethers, and Aerial Turret are all worth buying just in case you get the other pieces. For events, Jungle Ruins for Tool is good, but the loot option can also be strong for Aerial and Balloon Engine. Shipwreck for medium item is solid. Furry Friend for the skill if you have a food, friend, or toy. Also important to remember that Kite is a toy. For PvE Day 1, Kyber Drone, Pyro, and Haunted Kimono are the best options in my opinion. Kyver's skill is great for slow and aerial turret decks, Lighter from Pyro is amazing for tools, and Kimono's skill can be very helpful. Picking up Orbital Polisher is less important now that it takes 150 triggers. That being said, if you have Freefall, it's a must grab, and either way, a pretty harmless pickup at 2 gold. Just don't be afraid to sell it if you're stacking it too slow. Toolbox and Delivery Drone are both strong econ options. Toolbox can be useful in getting duplicates of key effects like Flare Gun at silver. Delivery Drone, on the other hand, has a lot of misses, but you can get strong loot at silver. Don't be afraid to upgrade either of them early, as they'll certainly pay for themselves. Lunchbox is a different story. It starts at silver and has multiple misses that sell for 0 gold. The regen passive is okay and can be very strong for the first few days, especially when combined with a chocolate event, but overall I feel like it's weaker than the other two. In general, I found that taking health over merchants is pretty strong. Most of the time, you can have a pretty serviceable deck after the second day. This frees you up to take events like Eating Contest, Fin, or Free Chocolate. Any item that sells for 0, such as chocolate, should be held in case you see a Barcoon or Valpak for free money, but you might want to sell them before the PvP fight. It would suck to lose by 10 HP with a bag full of chocolate. And that's it. A big patch is coming on the 8th, so who knows what all is going to change, but at the core, I assume everything I talked about will still at least be somewhat relevant. With no new cards added, the same medium items will be the goal day 1. Transitioning to the first good large item you see will still be a fairly strong play, and taking permanent guaranteed health over possible shops is still going to be smart. Beyond that, maybe some new events or rebalancing will put other cards in the spotlight, but for now, this will have to do. So go ahead and tell me how wrong I am in the comments. Do other YouTube stuff if you want, or don't. I'm not your real dad, and I'll see you all eventually.